The snow had been falling for 3 days without mercy. It came down in thick, suffocating sheets across the Greyspine Mountains, burying the old pine roads under 2 feet of white silence. The wolves had long since retreated to their dens. The ravens had stopped flying. Even the wind, usually so bold and howling through the mountain passes, had pulled back to a low, mournful whisper, as if the world itself was holding its breath. In the middle of this frozen nothing, 2 figures moved. One was large, very large. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her broad shoulders hunched forward against the cold, her thick gray-green skin dusted with snow that gathered in the deep lines of her face and the ridges of her heavy brow. Her name was Morra. She was a troll of the Stoneback clan, or she had been, until 4 days ago. Now she was simply a mother, and that title felt heavier than any name a clan could give. Pressed against her chest, wrapped in a leather hide she had torn from her own back covering, was a small child. A boy. His name was Drin. He was 4 years old, and his skin was lighter than his mother's, a warm gray-brown, smooth and unmarked, without the heavy ridges and stone-like texture that defined full-blooded Stoneback trolls. His eyes, when they were open, were a soft amber color, round and large, not the small, deep-set yellow eyes of his kind. He had his father's eyes, people always said. His father, who had been human. His father, who was dead. And it was those eyes, those soft, wrong, too gentle eyes, that had gotten them thrown out. Morra's feet were wrapped in rags. She had no boots. She had been given no time to gather supplies, no time to pack, no warning at all. The clan elder, Old Grug, had stood before the fire in the great cave hall and pointed one gnarled finger at her boy and spoken the words that Morra had feared for 4 years. Half-blood, weak blood, he will bring shame to the stone. He will bring sickness to the line. The boy leaves tonight, and so does she, for bearing him. Morra had fought. Of course she had fought. She had thrown 2 warriors off their feet and broken the nose of the elder's own son before they had pinned her down, 6 of them, 6 warriors to hold one mother, and dragged her to the cave mouth. Drin had been screaming. She could still hear it, that sound, cutting through the howling snow like a blade. They had thrown the boy out first. Then they had thrown her after him. The cave mouth had sealed shut behind them with the rolling of the great stone. And that was that. For years of clan life. Gone. She had found Drin in a snowbank 3 feet from the cave entrance, screaming his lungs empty. She had scooped him up, pressed him to her chest, and started walking. She did not look back. There was nothing to look back for. That had been 4 days ago. Now, on this 3rd day of heavy snowfall, Morra's legs were beginning to fail her. She could feel it, the deep, grinding exhaustion in her thighs, the way her knees trembled with each step. Trolls were not built for this kind of cold. They were built for caves, for stone warmth, for the deep earth. The mountain cold at this altitude was different. It crept into the muscles like a slow poison, thickening the blood, dulling the mind. Drin had stopped crying hours ago. That frightened her most. She looked down at the bundle against her chest. The boy's amber eyes were half closed, glassy, his small lips faintly blue at the edges. His breathing was shallow but present. She pressed her face to his forehead. Cold. Too cold. Drin. Her voice was a low rumble, the deep resonance of troll speech. Drin, stay with me. Look at Mother. The boy blinked. Slowly. Mama, he whispered. Just that one word, barely a breath. Yes. She pulled him tighter. Yes, I'm here. I'm right here. She scanned the landscape ahead through narrowing eyes. White. More white. Pine trees hunched under snow weight, like old men bowing. The road, if it could be called a road, had vanished entirely under the drifts. She had been navigating by the angle of the slope, keeping the mountain on her left, trying to descend to lower ground where there might be settlements, farms, something human. Trolls distrusted humans, and humans feared trolls. She knew this. She had always known this. But a feared roof was better than a beloved grave. Her left foot punched through a hidden ice shelf, and she went down on one knee with a crash that shook the snowbank around her. Pain flared up her shin. She held Drin above her with both arms, keeping him out of the snow, her teeth grinding against the noise that wanted to come out of her throat. She knelt there in the snow for a long moment. The cold gnawed at her knee through the rags. The wind pushed gently, mercilessly, against her back. Get up, she told herself. You do not die here. He does not die here. She got up. She smelled the smoke before she saw the light. It came to her on a shift in the wind. Wood smoke, thick and real, with something underneath it. Animal. Hey. The rounded, warm smell of a barn. She turned her head, following the scent the way a wolf follows a trail, and there, perhaps 400 yards off the road through a gap in the pines, she saw it. A yellow light. Faint, flickering, but steady. A lantern in a window. She stood very still for a moment, staring at it. Drin made a small sound against her chest. She walked toward the light. His name was Edric Thorne, and he had not spoken to another person in 11 months. This was not entirely by choice, and not entirely by accident. It was more the result of a long, slow erosion, the kind that happens to a person after loss stacks upon loss until the weight of people, of voices, of eyes that look at you and remember what you used to be, becomes simply too much to carry. He was 38 years old. He had come to this valley 6 years ago with his wife, Sarah, and the plan of building a small life. A forge, a farmstead, a quiet corner of the world where he could make things with his hands and be at peace. The forge had happened. The farmstead had happened. The quiet had happened. The peace had been more elusive. Sarah had died 3 years ago. A fever, quick and vicious, over in 10 days. Their daughter, born 2 months early in the chaos of that illness, had followed her mother within the week. Edric had buried them both in the field behind the house, under a pair of oak saplings he had planted himself. Since then, he had kept the forge running. He traded with the village of Millhaven, 8 miles south, twice a year. He grew enough to eat. He kept 2 goats and a pig and a flock of chickens that largely ran their own affairs. He read, in the evenings, by firelight. He drank, sometimes more than he should. He was, by any reasonable measure, surviving. But surviving is not the same as living, and Edric knew the difference better than most. Tonight he was in the forge, which was attached to the house by a covered walkway. He worked late most nights. The rhythm of hammer on iron was the only thing that reliably quieted the noise in his head. He was making a set of hinges, simple work, repetitive, the kind that let his hands move on their own while his mind drifted somewhere cooler and emptier. The forge fire was high. The room was hot and orange-lit. Iron filings gleamed on the earthen floor. He heard something outside. He stopped hammering. It was not the wind. The wind had a pattern he knew by heart after 6 years in this valley. This was different, a heavy, dragging sound, like something very large and very tired moving through the snow. Then a thump, something hitting the side of the house. Edric set down his hammer. He picked up the iron poker from beside the forge, not aggressively, not consciously, just the way a man alone at night picks up the nearest solid object when he hears an unfamiliar sound. He went to the forge door and opened it. The cold hit him like a wall. In the snow beside the covered walkway, half collapsed against the outer wall of his house, was the largest creature he had ever seen in his life. Gray-green, massive, wrapped in rags and snow and exhaustion. A troll. A female troll, judging by the shape, clutching something to her chest with both enormous arms, her head drooping forward, her breath coming in labored, steaming clouds. Edric stared. The troll raised her head slowly. Her eyes found him, dark, deep-set, red-rimmed with cold and sleeplessness. For a moment, they simply looked at each other across the snow. Then she moved her arms, just slightly, opening the leather bundle she was holding. Inside it, a small child. Gray-brown skin, round amber eyes blinking up at Edric with an expression of absolute blank exhaustion. The child reached one small hand toward him. Not toward the troll mother. Toward Edric. As if, in the fog of cold and near death, the child understood that this was where help lived. Edric looked at the hand. He looked at the mother. He looked at the hand again. He set down the poker. "Come inside," he said. Getting Morra through the door was a significant architectural challenge. The front door was built for a human. Edric was 6 feet tall and had built it accordingly. Morra was nearly 7 feet and wide. She turned sideways. She ducked. She scraped through with an inch to spare on either side and left a smear of snow on both door frames. Drin, still clutched to her chest, watched this process with the first flicker of genuine interest he had shown in hours. Inside, Edric had a fire. A real fire, in a proper hearth, with a cast-iron grate he had made himself and a stack of seasoned oak that radiated waves of deep, living heat. Morra stopped when she felt it. She stood very still, swaying slightly, her eyes closing. Sit down before you fall down, Edric said. He was pulling a heavy wool blanket from the chest near the wall, moving with the practical efficiency of a man who has had to solve unexpected problems alone for 3 years. Morra lowered herself to the floor. The chairs were not an option, obviously, and sat with her back against the stone wall beside the hearth, her legs folded, Drin still held to her chest. The heat washed over them both. Drin made a sound that was almost a sigh. Edric crouched down in front of them, keeping a respectful distance, and looked at the child. How long has he been this cold? Morra's voice, when it came, was low and rough and accented in the way Troll's speech always was, the consonants a little too heavy, the vowels stretched. Since morning. He would not stop shivering. Then he stopped shivering. That is when I knew it was bad. The shivering stopping is worse, yes. Edric stood, went to the kitchen, came back with a clay pot that he hung on the fireplace hook. He added water, dried meat, a handful of oats. Basic. Hot. Something. He got a second blanket from the chest and held it out toward Morra, not throwing it, not tossing it at her feet the way one might throw a scrap to an animal. He held it out as he would hold it out to a person. Morra looked at him for a moment. Then she reached out and took it. She wrapped it around herself and Drin together, tucking the edges in with the careful, practiced motions of a mother who has done this 10,000 times before, and the sight of it, so deeply, recognizably human in its tenderness, made something tighten briefly in Edric's chest. He pulled a stool close to the fire, a few feet away, and sat. Where did you come from? Greyspine. The upper pass. That's 30 miles from here in good weather. I know. A pause. The fire crackled. Drin's eyes had closed. Morra watched the boy's face with the focused, measuring attention of a mother monitoring every breath. Why? Edric asked. Not accusatory. Just a question, offered simply, the way a man who has lived alone long enough to be stripped of social pretense asks things. Morra was quiet for a moment. His eyes, she said finally. His eyes. He has his father's eyes. His father was not of the clan. Not a troll. Human. She paused. When Drin was born, the elder said he could stay if he was strong. If he grew the right way. If he was enough of us. Her hand moved, absently, to smooth the boy's hair. He is a good boy. Smart boy. Kind. But he did not grow the ridge marks. He did not grow the stone skin. He is soft. Too soft, they said. Her mouth compressed into a hard line. For days ago the elder made the judgment. Half-blood. Not clan. Both of us out. Edric said nothing for a moment. You walked here in 4 days? Through the pass. I had nowhere else to go. He looked at his hands. They were rough and scarred and dusted with iron filings that no amount of washing ever fully removed. How old is he? For years. What's his name? Drin. And yours? She looked at him with an expression that suggested she had not expected to be asked. Morra. Edric, he said. He didn't offer a hand. He understood that might not be the custom, and besides, his hand was about 1/3 the size of hers. But he nodded, the kind of nod that means acknowledged and welcome. He got up to stir the pot. Drin woke up properly about an hour later, when the heat had worked its way back through his small body and the broth was ready. He sat up in his mother's arms and looked around the room with enormous amber eyes, the shelves of books, the tools hanging on the wall, the dried herbs, the iron implements of the forged trade sitting in ordered rows by the far door. A world made of objects he had no names for. Then he looked at Edric, who was sitting across the fire, drinking a cup of something and pretending to read. Man, Drin said. Edric looked over. Yes. You live here. I do. Drin considered this with great seriousness, the way very young children consider things, with their whole face. Do you have a cat? I have 2 goats and a pig. This landed as excellent news. Drin sat up straighter. Can I see the pig? In the morning, Morra said, in a tone of voice that suggested this was final. Drin accepted this. He looked at Edric again. Do you have soup? I have broth, Edric said, which is soup's quieter cousin. Drin blinked at this. Then he looked at his mother. He's funny, Mama. Morra, whose expression had been guarded and watchful since the moment she had come through the door, glanced at Edric with something that was not quite a look of reassessment, but was close to it. Edric got up and poured broth into a small bowl. He had not intended for them to stay. He told himself this the next morning, when he woke to the smell of something burning and found Morra in his kitchen, attempting to make flatbread with a focused, catastrophic determination. She had used twice the flour, half the water, and had apparently misidentified the salt barrel and used ash instead. The result was a gray, smoking disc on the iron pan that not even the pig would have considered. "I was going to make breakfast," she said, without looking up, her voice carrying the aggressive dignity of someone who knows they have made an error but will not be the first to admit it. Edric looked at the smoking disc. He looked at Morra. He took the pan off the heat. "I'll cook," he said. "You can do something else." This turned out to be the most useful sentence he had spoken in 3 years. Morra, freed from the kitchen, took stock of the property with the systematic efficiency of someone who has spent their life in a clan where work was divided and done. She noted the split firewood pile, which was low. She noted the barn roof, which had developed a sag under the snow weight that would collapse it in another 2 weeks. She noted the fence line around the goat pen, which had 2 broken posts. She noted the frozen water trough. By the time Edric came outside with breakfast, actual edible breakfast, Morra had split enough firewood to last a month, broken the ice in the trough with her fist, and was examining the barn roof with the expression of a builder identifying a problem. "Crossbeam is cracked," she said, "and the third support timber has rotted at the base. I can fix this." Edric looked at the roof. He had known about it for weeks and had been calculating whether he had time to deal with it before the wait got critical. "You know carpentry? Troll caves need constant shoring. Every child in the clan learns to read stone and timber." She paused. "I will need tools." He showed her the tools. She chose 3 and spent the rest of the morning on the barn roof in the snow, working with a precise, unhurried competence that Edric watched from the yard for longer than was strictly necessary. Her movements were economical. She didn't waste energy. She tested each piece of timber before trusting her weight to it. She was, he realized, genuinely skilled. Drin, meanwhile, had found the pig. The pig's name was Harold, a fact Edric had never told anyone because it was slightly embarrassing, and Drin had named him immediately upon meeting him by placing both hands on either side of Harold's large pink face and saying, "Hello, pig. I will call you Brick because you look like a brick." Harold had accepted this with the philosophical calm of a pig who has long since made peace with the world. Drin followed Harold around the yard for 2 hours with the single-minded devotion of a child who has discovered his purpose. When Harold rooted in the snow, Drin crouched beside him and rooted in the snow too. When Harold sat down abruptly in the middle of the yard for no discernible reason, Drin sat down beside him and looked philosophically into the middle distance. Edric watched this too, and felt something move in his chest that he had not felt in a long time. Not grief, for once. Something else. Something that had more warmth in it. The snow kept falling for 2 more days. Then it stopped, and the world was sharp and white and very still, and Edric told himself that once the roads cleared, Morra and Drin would move on. They would find somewhere. There were troll settlements to the east, he thought, in the lower mountains. Mixed communities where the old clan rules didn't apply. They could go there. He did not mention this to Morra. He kept meaning to bring it up, and kept not bringing it up. On the 4th day of their staying, Drin got sick. Not dangerously sick. Not the cold returning. Just a child's fever, the kind that children get, burning and miserable and demanding. He lay on the pile of blankets Morra had arranged near the hearth and was, for 1 full day, the most aggrieved person in the mountain range. He wanted water, then didn't want water. He was too hot, then too cold. He wanted his mother to stay, then wanted her to go, then immediately wanted her back. Edric, who had planned to spend the day at the forge, found himself instead sitting on the floor near the hearth with a damp cloth and a book of stories he had bought years ago for reasons he had never fully examined. "What's that?" Drin asked, pointing a wobbly finger at the book. "Stories." Edric opened it. "Want me to read one?" Drin looked at him suspiciously, the way sick children regard all well-intentioned adults. "What kind of stories?" "Adventures. Monsters. Journeys. A woman who outwitted a sea god." A pause. "The monsters are not scary. Some are. Some are misunderstood." Drin appeared to weigh this. "Okay," he said finally, pulling the blanket up to his chin with great ceremony, settling in. "But if I don't like it, you have to stop." "Agreed." Edric read. Morra, mending a leather harness in the corner, listened without looking up, her hands working the leather steadily. By the 3rd page, the mending had slowed considerably and her gaze had drifted to the fire. By the 7th page, Drin was asleep. Edric closed the book quietly and looked at the sleeping child for a moment. The amber eyes were shut. His breathing was steady. The flush in his cheeks had begun to cool. Morra set down the harness. In the firelight, the deep lines of her face were softened. She looked, in that moment, not like a troll or a clan exile or a problem to be solved. She looked like a mother who had just watched her child be cared for and didn't quite know what to do with that. "You're good with him," she said quietly. "He's easy to be good with," Edric said. "He's a good kid." She was quiet for a moment. "You had a child," she said. Not a question. He looked at her. "How did you know?" "The book. It's not a book a man alone buys for himself." He looked down at the cover. She was right. He had bought it in Millhaven 2 months after Sarah died, when she had already been gone long enough that he knew the baby wouldn't survive, but not yet long enough that he'd stopped hoping. He had bought it in a kind of defiant, grief-broken advance, the way a person prepares for a future they know won't come, because preparing for it is the only way to keep breathing. "Yes," he said. "A daughter. She died with her mother 3 years ago." Morra said nothing for a moment. Then, I'm sorry about your clan." She made a sound that might have been a short, humorless laugh. "The clan is not worth your sorry. They were not kind people." A pause. "My mother was once. But the stone gets into you if you're in it long enough. The way of thinking." She looked at Drin. "I did not want that for him. So maybe they did you a favor." She looked at him with the expression of someone turning an uncomfortable idea over in their hands. "Perhaps," she said finally. "A favor that nearly killed us, but perhaps." Spring did not come quickly in the Greyspine foothills. It came in increments, a degree or two of warmth per week, the snow pulling back from the south-facing slopes first, the roads becoming mud before they became roads again. The world defrosted slowly, like a sleeping thing waking reluctantly. During these weeks, a kind of routine established itself at Edric's farmstead, with the inevitability of water finding a downhill path. Edric worked the forge. The spring thaw always brought orders from Millhaven and the surrounding farms. Plowshares, hinges, tools, the accumulated ironwork that a farming community needed after winter. He worked long days, and the ring of his hammer became, again, a sound of purpose rather than escape. Morra worked the land. This was not an arrangement they had discussed. It simply happened. She knew about timber and stone. She learned, with characteristic directness and no apparent embarrassment at not already knowing, about soil and planting schedules and the particular temperaments of goats. She was not a natural farmer. Trolls did not farm. But she was a natural worker, and the difference between a troll's endurance and a human's meant that she could turn earth in a morning that would have taken Edric 3 days. The goats were terrified of her for approximately 1 week. Then one of them, a brown nanny called Pepper who had always had an independent streak, decided Morra was acceptable and began following her around the yard. The other goat, seeing this, reluctantly updated its position. Harold the pig had never been frightened of Morra at all. Harold, Edric suspected, was frightened of nothing. Drin recovered from his fever and became, in the manner of small children given space and safety and regular meals, a small explosion of personality. He was curious about everything. The forge especially. He would sit on a safe stool near the doorway for hours, watching Edric work, asking questions in a steady, serious stream. Why does iron go soft in the fire? How do you know when it's hot enough? What does a plowshare do? Why does it make that noise? Can I try? Why not? What if I just hold it? Why not? He was also physically fearless in the way that children are when they have a mother 7 feet tall who will catch them. He climbed everything, jumped off everything, investigated every animal, corner, tool, and unidentified object on the property with the same thorough, heedless confidence. "He's going to hurt himself," Edric said one afternoon, watching Drin attempt to climb the fence post, while simultaneously holding Harold by the ear. Harold was expressing his views on this. "Yes," Morra said, from where she was turning soil nearby. "And then he will learn something. That's one philosophy. It's the only one that works with a child like him." She pulled a rock out of the turned earth and set it aside. "He needs to discover things himself. If I tell him, he nods, and then does the dangerous thing anyway. If he discovers it, he remembers." Edric considered this. "He's going to fall. He will fall. I will be there." She looked at Drin, who had made it to the top of the fence post, and was now standing on it with both arms out for balance. looking extremely pleased with himself. He knows I will be there. That is why he climbs. Something about this landed in Edric in a way he didn't immediately have words for. The trouble came from Millhaven, as trouble often did. It was early spring when a man named Croft arrived at the farmstead, a broad, red-faced man who served as something between a tax collector and a self-appointed representative of the village's general opinion. He came on horseback, which meant he had news he considered important, and he arrived in the middle of the morning to find Morra splitting logs in the yard with a hand axe that was meant to be a full-sized woodcutter's axe. Croft stopped his horse. Morra looked up. The horse began to express its own views on the situation. Croft, to his credit, did not run. He did, however, not dismount. He looked at Morra. He looked at the house. He looked at Drin, who had appeared in the barn doorway and was watching with the calm interest of a child who has stopped finding large things surprising. Edric came out of the forge at the sound of the horse. "Thorne," Croft said. His voice had a careful quality to it. "Controlled. You have a troll. On your property. I have a lot of things on my property." Edric wiped his hands on his leather apron. "To what do I owe the visit, Croft? People in the village have noticed. Smoke from the chimney. More smoke than usual. Different schedule." Croft's eyes moved back to Morra, who had returned to splitting logs with complete indifference to his presence. Each swing of the axe was clean and unhurried. "There are concerns." "About what, specifically?" "About a troll. Living. With a man alone." And his gaze moved to Drin, sitting now in the doorway with Harold. "What's that child?" "That's not a human child." "He's a child," Edric said flatly. He's a child," Edric said again, in a different tone of voice. Not louder, just more definite. Croft looked at him. He looked at the axe in Morra's hand, which she had not stopped swinging, log after log, splitting each one with the ease of someone breaking kindling. He looked at the set of Edric's jaw. "People will talk," Croft said, falling back on the eternal refuge of his type. "People talking," Edric said, "has never once stopped anything from happening. The snow fell this winter. The spring came after it. The goats don't care about people talking. I don't either. You're asking for trouble. I'm not asking for anything. I'm working my land. My guests are helping. Nobody's breaking any law." He looked at Croft steadily. "Is there something official you need from me? Because if there isn't, I've got work to do." A long pause. Croft looked again at Morra. She had not looked at him once. She split another log. The sound of it rang clean and sharp across the yard. "There will be questions," Croft said finally. "From the village." "Send them to me," Edric said. "I'll answer them." Croft turned his horse and left. Morra set down the axe after he was out of sight. She looked at Edric with that measuring expression he was becoming familiar with, the one that preceded either a statement of fact or a practical question. "He will come back," she said. "Probably. More of them, next time." "Likely." She was quiet for a moment. "You could have told us to leave." Edric turned back toward the forge. "I could have told you to leave 4 days after you arrived," he said. "I didn't." He went back inside. Drin watched all of this from the barn doorway. Then he looked at Harold. "The man is not afraid," he told the pig, with deep satisfaction. Harold remained unmoved by this analysis. The spring that year was soft and long and full of rain. The fields greened. The oak saplings in the back field leafed out, the ones over the graves, the ones Edric had planted 3 years ago with frozen hands and a grief so heavy he'd barely been able to drive the spade. He saw Morra notice them one afternoon, see the small stone markers, understand without being told. She said nothing. She didn't pass by those trees unnecessarily. But once, when she thought he wasn't watching, he saw her stand at the edge of the field and bow her head in the direction of the stones, the deep, slow bow that trolls use for the honored dead. He didn't mention it, but he didn't forget it either. Drin started speaking a third language that nobody had taught him. He already had troll tongue, which Morra had spoken to him since birth, the deep, consonant-heavy language of the mountain clans. He had learned to speak it quietly. She had taught him that, because it frightened people. And he had picked up common human speech, the language of this region, with the liquid ease of a child raised alongside it. The third language turned out to be forge language. The way Edric spoke when he worked, the names of tools, the temperatures, the angles, the vocabulary of iron and fire. Drin absorbed it the way children absorb things when they don't know them. They left in early autumn, before the first hard frost. Edric packed the forge tools first, then the books, then the practical things. He went to the field behind the house and stood at the 2 oak saplings for a long time. They were taller now. Their leaves were turning, the edges going gold and rust in the September cool. He spoke to them. Not long, not eloquent, not the kind of speech a person plans. Just the kind of thing you say to someone you're not leaving behind. Only leaving in one sense so you can take them in another. Morra stood at the edge of the field and waited, not close, not far. Drin said goodbye to Harold for 45 minutes. Harold bore this with nobility. They sold the goats to a farm wife 3 miles down the road. They sold Harold too, which Drin accepted with the stoic grief of a child who has been promised a pig at the new place. They took the wagon Edric had, and Morra walked beside it because the wagon was not engineered for 7-foot passengers, and the road east was good enough that this was not a hardship. On the second day of travel, Drin sat on the wagon seat next to Edric and watched the road, and said, out of nowhere, in the serious tone he used for important statements, "Are you going to be my other parent now?" Edric kept his eyes on the road for a moment. He could feel Morra's absence of reaction beside the wagon, the particular quality of someone listening very hard while pretending not to. "Would that be all right with you?" he asked. Drin thought about this with the full weight of his 4 years. "You know how to make things," he said. "And you're not afraid. Those are the important things." "Those are good criteria," Edric agreed. "Also, you read good stories." "That too." Drin nodded, satisfied, and looked at the road ahead. "Okay then," he said, as if this settled a matter that had been pending for some time. Which perhaps it had. Edric looked sideways at Morra. She was looking at the road ahead too. But there was something in the corner of her expression, a quality of ease, of held warmth finally released, that looked, in its own way, like coming home. The road went east. The morning light came over the hills in long horizontal sheets, gold and clean. The wagon wheels turned in the autumn mud. The 3 of them moved through the wide, quiet world, carrying what mattered, leaving behind what was done with them, making their way toward a life that no clan rulebook had a name for. And that was, perhaps, exactly the point.